as his mother's icy words pierced the Christmas air. "Blood is thicker than water, dear. You'll understand one day. I realized this wasn't just coldness, it was cruelty." But the day she sneered, "Planning to go to college? How ambitious for someone like you," I knew it was war. I remember the first time I saw him just as clearly as I remember the first time I met her, his mother. We were both 13, awkward in our own ways, but there was something about him that drew me in. It wasn't just a teenage crush, it felt like something more, something deeper. And as our relationship grew, so did my encounters with his family, particularly with his mother. My initial interactions with her were cordial, albeit somewhat cold. I was young, naive, and eager to be accepted. I remember how she would subtly direct me out of family photos during Christmas, saying things like, "Oh dear, this is just for immediate family. Maybe you could help with setting the table." I didn't think much of it at first. I thought maybe this was just how families were, having grown up in a less formal environment myself. But as time went on, these small acts of exclusion became more frequent. I would be gently ushered away under some pretense or another when it came to family games or discussions. "Why don't you take a break, dear? We're just having a little family catch-up," she would say, her tone polite yet firm. At first, I thought I was being overly sensitive, reading too much into harmless comments. But the pattern was undeniable. It wasn't just about being left out of pictures or games. It was the way she would talk about their family, her family, emphasizing the word as if to remind me that I was not a part of it. Her remarks were never overtly hostile, always wrapped in a veneer of politeness. Yet, the message was clear. I was an outsider. I tried to talk to my boyfriend about it, but he always brushed it off. "That's just how she is," he would say. But I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more to her behavior. It was as if she saw me as a threat, an unwelcome intruder in her carefully curated family life. What made it all the more confusing was her reputation within the family. She had fought with nearly every relative on her husband's side, cutting ties and burning bridges with a startling ease. I often wondered what had caused such rifts, what words had been said to create such chasms. But I never dared to ask. It was a strange situation to be in, feeling both a part of something special with my boyfriend and yet so distinctly apart from a key aspect of his life. As we grew older, our relationship strengthening with each passing year, the divide between me and his family, or rather his mother, only seemed to widen. But I held on to the hope that one day things would change, that I would be seen as more than just an outsider looking in. The chill of the winter air was nothing compared to the coldness I felt in her living room. Christmas was around the corner, and the house was draped in festive lights, the tree twinkling in the corner. Yet, the warmth of the season seemed to bypass her heart. "You know, dear, it's always nice to see young love. But remember, things change," she said one evening, her voice laced with a deceptive sweetness as she handed me a cup of hot cocoa. The words hung in the air, a veiled warning wrapped in a grandmotherly tone. I remember looking over at my boyfriend, seeking reassurance. But he was engrossed in conversation with his father, laughing at some joke. I felt a pang of isolation, a silent scream in a room full of voices. "Change can be good," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "It brings new opportunities." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Indeed it does. But family always remains. Blood is thicker than water, after all." The way she stressed family made my stomach knot. It was a barrier, a line drawn in the sand that I couldn't cross. Days turned into months, and every family gathering felt like navigating a minefield. The subtle jabs continued, each one a reminder of my outsider's status. "Would you mind helping with the dishes, dear? We're just going to have some family time," she'd say, her words a velvet knife. I would retreat to the kitchen, the sound of their laughter a distant echo, and I'd wonder what I was doing wrong. Why couldn't I be a part of that laughter? Was it so hard for her to accept me? My boyfriend's obliviousness to the situation only added to the weight of my solitude. I loved him, but in moments like these, I felt miles apart from him. It was as if he lived in a different reality, one where his mother's barbs were just harmless comments. One evening, as we sat down for dinner, she turned to me with a calculated casualness. "So have you thought about what you'll do after high school? It's important to have a plan, especially when you're well, not from a well-off family. I felt my cheeks burn, the sting of her words sharper than any physical blow. I have, I replied, trying to mask my hurt. I'm planning to go to college. I want to study psychology. Psychology? She raised an eyebrow. Interesting choice for someone who struggles to understand basic family dynamics. My fork clattered against my plate. I looked up, meeting her gaze. There was no mistaking the message now. She didn't see me as worthy, not of her family, and certainly not of her son. It was in that moment, under the harsh glare of the dining room light, that I realized this was more than just a series of misunderstandings. This was a deliberate campaign to undermine me, to make me feel small and unwelcome. And for the first time, I began to question whether I could ever truly be a part of the family I so desperately wanted to belong to. The tension in the air was palpable as the holiday season approached. Christmas, a time for joy and family, had become a battleground of unspoken words and hidden resentments. My boyfriend and I were caught in a delicate balancing act, trying to divide our time between my family and his. But this year, the scales tipped dangerously. I think we should spend Christmas morning with my family and then the afternoon and evening with yours, my boyfriend suggested, his voice hesitant, as if walking on thin ice. I nodded, appreciating his attempt at fairness, but dreading the inevitable reaction from his mother. Sounds like a plan. But let's brace ourselves for the storm. The storm came, as expected, but not in the form I anticipated. It was a cold front from his mother, a series of messages oscillating between guilt-tripping and outright anger. She couldn't fathom why we would choose to spend more time with my family, implying a lack of loyalty on our part. In an attempt to smooth things over, I sent her a text, explaining our decision and expressing my desire to still celebrate with them. We really want to spend a full day celebrating Christmas with you, playing cards and enjoying the lights, I wrote, hoping to bridge the gap. Her response was a thunderclap. So, now you dictate how my son spends his holidays? You're pulling him away from us. You've always been manipulative, even as a teenager. I stared at the phone, my heart sinking. Words like manipulative and narcissist were thrown around, painting me as some villain in their family story. I was overseas at the time, hoping for a respite, but the conflict followed me like a shadow. My boyfriend stood by me, his own disbelief and anger growing with each accusatory message from his parents. They came to our house, uninvited, a confrontation that ended with him defending me and our relationship and demanding they leave. I can't believe they called you abusive and narcissistic, he said later, his voice a mix of anger and confusion. They've crossed a line, and I don't know if we can come back from this. His words echoed in my mind as I returned home, hoping for some resolution. But the divide had only deepened. They called him, backpedaling on their accusations, but the damage was done. They nitpicked my every action, every word, turning mundane gestures into evidence of my supposed manipulative nature. As I listened to their baseless claims, a realization dawned on me. This wasn't just about Christmas or family time. This was a concerted effort to undermine me, to paint me as the villain in their son's life. And as the accusations piled up, so did my resolve. My boyfriend and I made a decision, one that was heartbreaking but necessary. We decided they would not be invited to our wedding. It was a line drawn in the sand, a stand against the relentless tide of their unwarranted hostility. But even as we made this decision, I couldn't help but feel a profound sense of loss. A part of me had always hoped for reconciliation, for a family united. But as the snow fell softly outside, blanketing the world in white, I realized some divides were too wide to bridge, and perhaps some ties were meant to be broken. The flight back home felt longer than usual, each mile stretching out endlessly. My mind was a whirlwind of emotions, replaying the recent events that had turned our lives upside down. I had hoped my trip overseas would offer a break from the tension, but instead, it felt like I was returning to a battlefield. When I walked into our house, the familiar walls seemed to echo with the remnants of the argument that had taken place in my absence. My boyfriend greeted me with a tight hug, a silent acknowledgement of the storm we were weathering together. He recounted the details of his parents' unexpected visit, how they had come with accusations and left with anger. His voice trembled with a mixture of fury and disbelief. "They said you were controlling me, that our relationship is abusive. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I had to ask them to leave. I couldn't stand hearing them talk about you like that." I sat there, numb, trying to process his words. It was one thing to be on the receiving end of passive-aggressive comments, but to be accused of being an abuser was something entirely different. It felt surreal, like a twisted narrative from a different life. In the days that followed, our home became a refuge and a prison. We were safe from their accusations, but we couldn't escape the reality of the situation. The rift between my boyfriend and his parents had grown into a chasm, and I couldn't help but feel responsible. We spent evenings talking, sometimes in circles, about what to do next. "Maybe we should just elope," he suggested one night, half joking, half serious. "At least then we wouldn't have to worry about who to invite." I laughed, but the idea lingered in my mind, a tempting escape from the drama. Yet deep down, I knew running away wasn't the solution. This wasn't just about a wedding. It was about standing our ground, about not letting their baseless accusations define us. The calls from his parents continued, a mix of backtracking and new accusations. They seemed to be grasping at straws, trying to find any reason to validate their disdain for me. "They said you don't say please or thank you enough," my boyfriend told me, his voice tinged with exasperation. "And now they're claiming you never greet them properly. It's like they're creating a version of you that doesn't even exist." I listened, feeling a mix of anger and sadness. The allegations were so petty, so far from the truth, that it was almost laughable. Almost. But beneath the absurdity was a painful realization. They were trying to erase the person I was, replacing me with a caricature of their own making. As the days turned into weeks, the initial shock of their words gave way to a deep-seated determination. I refused to let their perception of me become my reality. I had spent too long trying to win their approval, to fit into their narrow definition of family, but no more. It was time to define myself, to stand firm in who I was and who I wanted to be. The decision not to invite them to our wedding solidified in my heart. It wasn't just about drawing a line. It was about choosing ourselves, our love, over the toxic dynamics of his family. It was a choice made with a heavy heart, but with a clear vision of the future we wanted to build, one based on respect, understanding, and unconditional love. As the winter turned to spring, I watched the world come back to life, the snow melting away to reveal the resilient earth beneath. And in that renewal, I found a reflection of our own journey, a testament to the strength that comes from facing adversity together. Returning to a semblance of normal life after such turmoil was like trying to piece together a shattered vase. We knew it would never be the same, but we hoped to find some beauty in the imperfection, in the new shape our lives were taking. As I sat across from my boyfriend one evening, the low hum of the city outside our window, I couldn't help but feel the weight of his parents, accusations lingering between us. "Do you think there's any truth to what they said? About me being manipulative?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He reached across the table, taking my hand in his. "No, absolutely not. They don't see the amazing person I see. They don't know you like I do." His words were a balm, but the scars were still tender. I found myself replaying every interaction with his parents, analyzing my words, my actions, searching for any hint of the person they accused me of being. It was exhausting, like chasing shadows in a never-ending maze. Their recent call, an attempt to retract their earlier allegations while still hurling new ones, only added to the confusion. The claims were petty, almost laughable in their triviality, but their impact was profound. They accused me of not saying please or thank you enough, of failing to greet them properly, a litany of manners they claimed I lacked. I found myself laughing one moment and crying the next. How can they even say these things? After everything, they focus on pleasantries, I said, my laughter tinged with disbelief. "It's their way of trying to control the narrative," my boyfriend replied, his voice steady but his eyes revealing the turmoil within. "They're trying to paint you in a certain light to justify their behavior." The conversation shifted to our upcoming wedding, a topic that once brought joy but now was shadowed by the absence of his parents. "Are we doing the right thing?" I asked, the doubt creeping in. "We are," he affirmed, his grip on my hand tightening. This is about us, our love, our future, not their prejudices. In the weeks that followed, we focused on planning our wedding, a celebration of our journey and the life we were building together. It was a bittersweet process, the joy of planning our special day mixed with the sorrow of his parents' absence. But as the wedding day approached, I found strength in the love that surrounded us. Friends, my family, and most importantly, my partner. Their support was a reminder that family isn't just about blood. It's about the people who stand by you, who see you for who you truly are. On the eve of our wedding, as I stood looking out at the city, the lights twinkling like distant stars, I realized that this was a new beginning, a chance to leave behind the hurt and the accusations, to step into a future filled with love and understanding. Our decision to exclude his parents from the wedding wasn't just about drawing a boundary. It was about choosing happiness over toxicity, peace over conflict. It was a declaration that we would not let their narrow-minded views dictate the course of our lives. As I turned away from the window, ready to embrace the future, I knew that the road ahead would have its challenges. But I also knew that together, we were strong enough to face whatever came our way, bound not by the approval of others, but by the love we shared. A love that was our own, unbreakable, and true. On the morning of our wedding, I awoke with a mix of emotions swirling within me. Today was supposed to be the happiest day of my life, yet there was a shadow cast by the absence of his parents. As I sat on the edge of the bed, watching the sunrise paint the sky in hues of orange and pink, I couldn't help but reflect on the journey that had led us here. The house was quiet, the calm before the storm of celebration. In this rare moment of solitude, my thoughts drifted to his parents. There was a part of me, a small, hopeful part, that had wished for reconciliation, for a miracle that would mend the broken ties. But as the light of dawn grew stronger, so did my realization that some things were beyond repair. I thought about the accusations, the hurtful words, the relentless attempts to paint me as someone I wasn't. It had been a battle, not just against their perceptions, but against my own doubts. Their words had planted seeds of uncertainty in my mind, making me question my worth, my place in his life. But as I sat there, on the brink of a new chapter, I realized that their words had also given me something invaluable: resilience. I had learned to stand up for myself, to trust in the love and support of those who truly knew me. I had discovered a strength I didn't know I had, forged in the fire of their unwarranted judgment. I stood up, my reflection in the mirror a testament to the journey. Today I was not just a bride. I was a survivor, a warrior who had fought for her place in the world. The day unfolded in a blur of laughter, tears, and endless dancing. Our friends and family surrounded us, their love and joy palpable in every hug, every congratulatory smile. My parents beamed with pride, their eyes shining with unshed tears as they watched us exchange vows. And there he was, my partner, my rock, standing before me with a look of love so deep, so unwavering that it took my breath away. As we said our vows, promising to love and cherish each other in sickness and in health, I knew that we were more than just husband and wife. We were partners in every sense of the word, bound by a love that had weathered the fiercest of storms. As the night drew to a close, we stood together, watching our guests depart. The air was filled with the echoes of laughter and music, the remnants of a day filled with love and celebration. "We did it," he whispered, his arms wrapped around me. "We really did it." "Yes, we did," I replied, my heart full, "and we'll keep doing it every day for the rest of our lives." We stood there, in each other's embrace, looking out at the starlit sky. It was a moment of peace, of contentment, a quiet end to a day that marked the beginning of our forever. As I lay in bed that night, his arms around me, I realized that this was what true love felt like. It wasn't just about the romantic gestures or the passionate declarations. It was about standing together in the face of adversity, about choosing each other over and over again, even when the world seemed to be against us. Our journey hadn't been easy, but it had brought us to this moment, to a love that was stronger and more profound than I could have ever imagined. And as I drifted off to sleep, I knew that no matter what the future held, we would face it together, our love a beacon that would guide us through the darkest of times.